So we are now joined by Anna Pallai. Hello, Anna.
Hello there.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Lovely. Now, I love your Twitter account. I absolutely love it. It makes me both hungry and a little ashamed of an entire decade all at the same
I
time.
think you should also be ashamed for feeling hungry when looking at it.
It's true, but I shamefully will eat anything.
So what made you think of sharing a lost generation of food with the world?
I left my job last summer, and in between setting up my company, I work in publishing, I was at my mum's house looking through her old cookbooks, which when I was a child I used to frequently look through and do the old thumbs up for recipes I liked the look of and the thumbs down for ones that didn't look so good. So I thought I'd have a flick through them. And she used to collect the bi-monthly magazines of Carrier's Kitchen and Supercook, and then you put them all together in a big ring binder. And she still religiously used them. So I was looking through them, and I was struck by, initially, one called Eggs Cooked Like Tripe, which, being my mum, had a massive tick next to it to say that, yes, she'd cooked it, and yes, it was a success. So I found it really funny, put it on Facebook, mainly to embarrass her. And it really went from there. The more I looked through them, the more revolting or seemingly revolting recipes I found. I put them on Facebook, then thought, I'm going to bore my friends very, very quickly with this, so I'll bore people on Twitter instead, because they have a bit more of a choice whether to look at it or not. And it really went from there. I was lucky enough that it took off. And as I say, I work in publishing. Spoke to my friend who agreed to be an agent for me, and put together a proposal. So, yeah.
So we love food on this show. Do you love food, or have the things you've posted been enough to kind of put you off food forever?
There have been times when I thought I might never eat again. I do like food. I don't like much of the food I post, but I think what's worth saying is that when I went, I mean, particularly with the book, but when I went into it, I was very aware that a lot of food, the reason it looks bad is to do with the styling of the time, it's to do with the food photography, and I think that it's fair to say that the way that food is presented now will also be mocked in years to come. So I don't think that every single recipe I post necessarily would taste bad. It just looks either funny or revolting. But I like to keep the two things separate, and also a lot of the cookbooks I'm looking through have plenty of dishes that you would still eat now. So I think I do enjoy food. I am a vegetarian though, so there's not many of the dishes I post that I would actually eat myself.
Yeah, and certainly with things like everything being covered in aspic and gelatin, for a vegetarian, that's an instant no.
Absolutely. I mean, even if it didn't sound revolting in the first place, I wouldn't be able to eat it. It's quite a useful get out for me as well.
But for our younger listeners, what is all this about? What is aspic and things like that? And why is all the stuff you post considered so awful?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not a food historian as such, so I don't really know why it was so popular. I think one of the things I found while doing the book was that convenience food became a really big thing in the 70s because freezers became much more common. So many more households had freezers, and so a lot more people were buying convenience food. But then rather than just serving, say, fish fingers, you would find that they would serve fish fingers with pineapple or fish fingers cooked in foil with a sort of warm tartar sauce on it. So that was one thing that you could see very clearly why it happened. As for the aspic thing and the gelatine, I don't really know. I mean, even if someone told me the historical reason for it, it would still seem pretty inexplicable as to why you would actually cook with it. And one of the things I found interesting doing the Twitter account as well is that I have a lot of American followers, and a lot of them say, oh yeah, we still have that at Thanksgiving, or my grandma still makes that. So I think, in the UK, it doesn't seem quite as, it seems a much stranger thing, but in America, not that many people are fazed by it. They're more fazed by the stuff that's gone into the aspic in the first place. Because I think at some point it seemed like they put pretty much any food in aspic and that would be your dinner.
How many of the things you've posted have you actually tried?
Probably none of them.
Oh,
I
excellent.
can't remember any I've actually eaten. I think the ones I did post of recipes I'd actually made when I was a child, because I had a Good Housekeeping cookbook for children, and the very first thing I remember making was something called a sausage cabin, which was a house made of with walls of sausage and a sausage chimney with a mashed potato filling, and then sliced tomatoes for the roof and peas for the garden. That's one of the things I do remember, but obviously that's more about how it's styled than what the actual food is. But no, not too much. But when I had the launch party for my book, I asked a food stylist to kindly make some of the dishes. So she made the cauliflower surprise, which is a cauliflower which I think has 8 sections cut out of it, which are then filled with frozen beef burgers, and then slices of tomato decorating it. That looked quite spectacular. She also made a cucumber and grape lime jelly mould, which again was quite revolting. And my favourite thing she made, which actually isn't in the book because there aren't stills of it, Fanny Craddock made something called boiled egg swans, where she cuts sides of the boiled eggs off, sticks them back on with potato, and makes their necks out of a pipe cleaner, and then they're floating on a bed of blue mashed potato. And I think that's my favourite thing that I've seen made from it. But even though it's vegetarian, I didn't really fancy trying it.
Wow. That sounds quite incredible. I mean, when you started out talking about the sausage cabin, I was thinking I could get on board with that, but then
Yeah, exactly.
boiled egg swans, blue mashed potato, I think, was the thing that eventually put me off that entire thing.
Yeah, I think so, and I think food dye was quite unnecessarily included in a lot of the recipes. One of the ones that I also had made was something called a sandwich, which is a loaf of bread cut horizontally, and each layer has a different filling, but then the whole thing is iced with a green cream cheese, and then piped with a yellow cream cheese and mayonnaise mix, and that really looked particularly disgusting and didn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah, it seems like a bit of overkill there.
I think so. It also made my son cry because it smelled so bad. So.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, that's an interesting point. Obviously, diet and food consumption is changing massively, and it almost sounds like we've simplified a little bit since the 1970s. Do you think we'll ever end up back there? Do you think this food is going to become more fashionable or more stylish again?
Well, I think what could well happen is the same as that happens with fashion, in that some of the elements of it may well come back, but in a sort of with a modern twist on it. And I know there's certain restaurants, I think there's someone called Coin Laundry in London that does a take on 70s food, but they wouldn't be serving it exactly as it was then, in the same way that, you know, Flares came back, but they were modified for a modern audience and modern consumers. I mean, I think there will at some point come a change with food styles. Part of the reason I did the book was a reaction to the sort of smug sense of wellness connected with food, and why I like the food from the 70s is the fun element of it, and the fact that you're cooking, yes, to impress someone, but also to share it with someone, instead of, you know, sort of Instagrammers taking photos of something that's really, they're just showing how virtuous they are, as opposed to anything else. And I don't really like that. I like food as being something that you have with friends or possibly with your boss, and there's an enjoyment element to it. I mean, whether you would actually enjoy the food in it is another matter, but it was certainly made to be enjoyed.
Yeah, there is a big difference between a hipster posting their quinoa salad to Instagram and some of the things in the book. I think,
you know, when people are doing that, I tend to feel that they're doing it to say, look how virtuous I am, because and I think in that way, I mean, I know there's been a sort of people now deriding the whole idea of wellness in eating, and, you know, various cooks have come out and blasted it for promoting sort of unhealthy eating habits as opposed to healthy eating habits, with, you know, the idea that some food is good and some food is bad, rather than having a balanced approach to it all.
Now, I have a saying that the best and worst things in life are brown. Why exactly does everything from the 1970s look so brown?
I don't think the photography is necessarily lasted that well. I don't really know, though, to be honest. I think, I look at old photos of my house where I grew up initially, and everything was very brown there, and I don't think you can only blame it on the camera film. But I don't know. I suppose people might say, yes, nowadays, why is everything muted, neutral mushroom colours and stuff? It's probably the same thing. It's just a fashion. But yeah, I think probably the camera film has not lasted that well.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to where my grandparents lived, and everything there seemed brown. The carpet,
yeah,
the
and I
sofas
deliberately, when I've posted stuff on Twitter or in the book, I've deliberately never used any filters as well, because you need to show it as it is. I mean, some of the recipe cards I use, the photography is quite extraordinary. I mean, some of the pictures are completely out of focus and not centered in the slightest. It's almost like they've said, okay, let's just slap this on and go to press. Whereas other ones, I know that Robert Carrier styled a lot of the shoots himself. I don't think he actually took the photos, but, a lot of work went into styling them, whereas I think with some of probably the ones coming from big brands, it was probably more of a rush job.
So we've had people on the show this series talking about eating bugs. Now, because you're a vegetarian, it kind of doesn't really apply, but do you think you'd rather eat insects or one of these 70s recipes?
As you say, it probably is a moot question, but I'd definitely rather have a dish from one of the 70s books. I did once go to one of those restaurants where they serve bugs and other, strange meats and stuff, and I have to say it was one of the most unpleasant experiences. I mean, they did have vegetarian food, but just the thought of other people eating bugs at neighbouring tables was enough to turn my stomach.
Yes, it's not something that we've actually tried here, but we are considering it.
Yeah, well, it's good to keep an open mind, I suppose.
I think we're doing more than considering it. Oh, or is that a spoiler? Anyway, Anna, what's next? What else is on the horizon?
I'm not really sure, to be honest. I do have one other idea for a book, but I'm not quite sure if it's ready to go. I think what was good about this book was that it was such a natural transition from, sitting around to it becoming a book. When I left my last job, everyone said, are you going to write a book now? And I was like, absolutely no way. I'm not a writer. There's no way I'm doing it. So the fact that a year later I'm here with a book out is very strange. But I didn't ever set out to write it. It was more, once the Twitter took off, I thought, actually, this would make a really good book. So I've got lots of other projects that I'm working on, and actually I'm agenting. So some of the ideas for books I have, I know that I'm not the right person, so I'm sort of talking to other people about writing them instead, which I think makes much more sense.
Oh, brilliant. And speaking of the book then, how can we get our hands on it, and what's in store for us if we do get a copy?
Well, you can get your hands on it, hopefully, in most bookshops. It's also available online. And I think I've themed the book by courses, so it starts with canapes and goes all the way through to desserts, but then I also have food for children and what I originally termed foreign food, because that's what it would have been called then, but now it's called Around the World. But also at the end of the book, I've included, I think, 5 or 6 recipes that you can try yourself. They're all pretty simple. But,
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been
thanks for having me on.
It's been fascinating to meet the person behind one of the most interesting Twitter accounts, I suppose, is the way of putting it, of the past 12 months.
As always, we ask our guests to pick a song. Do you have something you would like us to play for you?
I'd like Strange Relationship by Prince. Nothing to do with the 70s whatsoever, but I've always been a huge Prince fan, like most people, I guess. And I always wanted to have a Prince song at my wedding, but we quickly realised that there weren't too many that were suitable to play in front of the whole family. So this is one of the few where he doesn't get too outrageous by the end of the song. So that one, please.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much.